Okay, today we're talking about how to prove that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So, we know a quadrilateral is what type of figure? Four sides, right? We talked about a parallelogram. What are specific things that you guys know about parallelograms that have to be true? Two pairs of parallel sides, right? So opposite sides have to be parallel. What else did we talk about? There were three things, and they were on your quiz yesterday. The very last question that you had to say why they were parallelograms. Opposite sides are parallel. What else? What about the angles? Opposite angles are congruent. And then what about the diagonals? That was the most missed question. What do the diagonals do? Bisect, yes. Okay. Diagonals have to bisect. Okay. Now, while we're here, I'm just going to tell you, I noticed a lot of people on our quiz put all sides parallel. Well, is it possible for four sides of a figure to all be parallel? Does that make sense? No, right? Because two of those sides are intersecting. So we have to think about that, opposite sides only. Same thing on our angles. I saw a lot of people put all sides or all angles are congruent. Well, not all angles are congruent, but opposite angles are congruent, okay? So we're going to talk through those today, how we can use those to help us prove it's a parallelogram or not, okay? So for any quadrilateral, if at least one of the following reasons, so one or more could be true, but as long as one of them is true, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram, okay? So if both pairs, right, not just one pair, but both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, then we can say it is a parallelogram, right? Which we already knew because we just talked about that. So the first one is a parallelogram, right? Because opposite sides here are parallel, opposite sides on the top and bottom. Why is the second one not? Because what do we not know about these two sides? We don't know for a fact that they are parallel, okay? So those are question marks because we really just don't know, okay? So we cannot say for sure just because one pair is. We have to have both. All right, same thing on opposite sides. If both pairs of opposite sides are congruent, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram, right? Again, we can see that in the first example. Opposite sides here are shown to be congruent. Opposite sides here are also shown to be congruent. Why can I not say that on the second one? Yeah, really, you don't know anything about opposite sides. I don't know the length of this. I also don't know the length of the top part, okay? Everybody understand the difference on those two? Okay? All right, opposite angles converse theorem. We've talked about that as well. If both pairs of opposite angles are congruent, then we can say it's a parallelogram, right? Again, we can see that in the first figure. They're marked with two arcs here, two here, so opposite are congruent. These are marked with one arc, so those are also congruent. In the second one, I don't know anything about my opposite angles, so I cannot say that they are congruent. Okay, the next one is new. We haven't talked about this one yet. Opposite sides parallel and congruent. Now, everything else we've talked about is both pairs. What does this one say? One pair. So this is true if one pair of opposite sides is both congruent and parallel. So again, we see those markings. The double arrows show that it's parallel. The dashes through show that it's congruent. So same sides are both congruent and parallel. On the second one, we have a pair of congruent sides and a pair of parallel sides, but why would that not work? Yeah, because it's not the same pair of sides, okay? So that's the biggest difference we have to understand about that one. And then the last one we've talked about as well, diagonals. If the diagonals of a quadrilateral bisect each other, how do we know if something bisects? Cuts it in half, okay? So the first parallelogram, we can see both sets of lines are congruent. In the second one, only one set, right? Only this set of lines that is bisected is congruent, so that's why it's not a parallelogram. Okay? So, in truth, really the only new thing to you today that we haven't talked about yet is one pair of opposite sides that are both congruent and parallel. Okay? I'm going to go through just 3 examples on the back, and then I'm going to let you guys just practice some of these on your own today. Okay? All right, so example 1, on all 3 of these, it's asking us to say, is the quadrilateral a parallelogram? And then we're going to say why or why not. All right? Any thoughts on the first example?
Yeah.
Why?
Opposite interior. No, you can add them all up and then subtract them to 60.
Good. Listen, our brain does immediate because we see that these two are 60. Don't most of us automatically think this has to be 120? How many of you think automatic? It's fine. My brain tends to go there too, right? Opposite angles are congruent, but that's only if it tells you it's a parallelogram, okay? So if it doesn't, we have to find that another way. Like Turner said, we can take 360 and subtract the 3 angles we have. So subtract 120, subtract 60, subtract 60. Now, we do get 120. So that does work here. So now can we say this is a parallelogram? Yes. Why? What's the reason? Okay. Good. Opposite angles are congruent. Okay. All right. Any thoughts on example 2? This one is a little tricky. Think about the new one we talked about today. What was the new one we talked about today?
Congruent and parallel.
One pair of sides is congruent and parallel. Okay. Would it be possible, so we know that these two are congruent, is it possible for us to say that these two are also parallel? There's one other thing in this figure that will tell you that. What? Angles. What type of angles are these? Opposite interior. So what does that tell you about these two things? Good. So alternate interior angles give you that these are congruent or parallel, sorry. Excuse me. So we can say yes, one pair of opposite sides, congruent and parallel. Last one should be pretty easy. No. Why? Yeah, agree. We only have one pair of opposite angles that are congruent. Okay. The rest of this we're saving for tomorrow. Okay. Let me put your assignment up here for you. Yeah, it'll be out of the book today.